Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Carol here at Oak House Journals. I thought I would do a quick craft along with me today, and it's all in connection with this Ryvita box. Would you believe it? I've been making the mini trifold journals since October of last year. Pretty full on since then, and it's only recently that I found the perfect size box for posting them out in. I mean, the journals are pretty robust. They get wrapped up with bubble wrap, but I do like to put them inside some cardboard, a cardboard box, or some repurposed packaging, just to make sure they're safe and sound during the shipping process, and also so that I've got enough room to hold some little freebies and thank you gifts to the ladies that have purchased my journals. But as I say, it's only recently that I found absolutely the perfect size box for my mini trifolds, and it's these Ryvita boxes. I mean, I'm not a great fan of Ryvita, but I have to say I've eaten a good few of these lately just so that I can get the cardboard boxes. They're not the sturdiest of boxes, as you can see. So what I've been doing to repurpose and recycle the box is to collage the boxes to make them pretty. And I did do a very quick video of the finished product when I collaged one of these boxes and sent it out to Angela with her journal inside. But unfortunately, I've been having storage issues with my Mac, and I accidentally deleted it. I know. Anyway, it's happened, so I can't show you the end product. So please bear with me over the next couple of videos, and you will then see the finished product, because I'm very much going to follow the same process and use the same papers on this one as I did for the one that I sent Angela's journal out in. So as you can see, all I've done is open the packaging. And as I say, it's pretty lightweight. The only difference with the one I'm going to do this time from Angela's one was that, as you can see, there's some perforation along here. There is a thumb hole here and more perforation down there. And what I did last time is I ripped along the perforations. Now, I'm not going to do that this time for the simple reason that it actually was a bit of a nightmare collaging that angle. Not hugely difficult, but what I want to do is I want to keep this flap intact. What I also did last time was I cut across here to get rid of that thumb hole. Well, I'm not going to be doing that this time. What I am going to be doing is reinforcing this piece here with some tape on both sides, only to strengthen it a little bit as I go along and collage it, or decoupage it rather, because I actually will be doing a closure over this piece. So it will just reinforce it a little bit, but not necessarily too much. And particularly the reason I like these boxes is that they aren't too thick. I've tried doing this sort of thing on thick corrugated cardboard or even Amazon packaging, and they do become very, very rigid and almost excessively sturdy to send out in the post. Whereas with these, the decoupaging and the layers that I put on it make them absolutely sturdy without being overly weighty. Okay, so let's get started. Now here, as you can see, I've got another little bit of a hole. I'm not bothered about that one at all. I'm not going to reinforce that. And as you can see, I have a little bit of packaging just left on here. And all I'm going to do is tidy that up. I'm not going to do too much in relation to that because obviously we're going to be covering that up, but I just don't want those loose ends hanging around. So let me get rid of those bits. There we go. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my box and make, actually, I'm just going to close it down for a minute. I'm actually going to open up my box and make it a little bit easier for me to decoupage. And this, again, is really easy. and there's a little bit more here left over in terms of packaging that I'm not going to need. So I'm just tidying it up a little bit. I'm not overly worried about it. As you can see, if you are, then you could file that down, use a little bit of sandpaper or an emery board, but that isn't going to show, and it isn't rough. Okay, so I'm going to put those bits aside and find the side seam. Where are we? Oh, there it is. Okay, so the side seam is here, and I'm just gently going to ease my thumb along it. Now, the reason I open up my boxes, if I can, is because it makes life so much easier when you come to pasting and gluing and trimming it off. And also because I like to decorate the inside and the outside of my boxes. Now, this has a slight finish on this side where obviously they've done the printing. I'm not bothered about that. I know from doing the previous ones that it's not an issue when I come to use my glue on here. If you are, again, you could give it a quick rub over with some sandpaper or an emery board, not an issue. And that will give it a tooth, as they call it, for the glue to adhere to. But as I say, I've found with doing this previously that it's not an issue on this particular box. The glue I'm going to be using is this C.xx soft matte gel. It's transparent. It's really good. It dries flexible, but it also gives it this cardboard a little bit of rigidity, even though it is flexible. In the one I did for Angela, I used Ranger Multi-Matte Medium. Now that is my preferred glue of choice when I'm making my journal covers, and I decoupage over the top of those, because it's also a really, really good sealant and it's very forgiving. But I haven't got any of that at the moment. I'm waiting for a delivery to come through on Amazon. So I do have this Finnabar or Finnabar, however you prefer to pronounce it, C.xx soft matte gel. And this is pretty good stuff. So I'm going to use this. I'm just hoping, though, that I have enough, because I will be putting several layers on too. And I can get the lid off. Doesn't want to come. There we go. I am getting a little bit low on that as well. But hopefully I should have enough. I'm also going to be using one of these Tim Holtz Distress Collage brushes. You seriously do not have to use something like this. A bog standard, excuse my French, a bog standard paintbrush. Let me just grab one for you. Something like that would be equally as good. You seriously do not need a collage brush. Anything that will put glue on here, and you'll probably see me resort to using my fingers as well for putting glue on and rubbing it in, because certainly with the Ranger Multi-Matte Medium, it's really lovely to use your fingers on it and make sure it really adheres nicely. What I will be using in terms of papers, I will be putting a base coat down using some of these very thin ledger pages. This is a fairly bright colour, so I want something to cover that before I start putting my pattern papers on and my book pages. You do not have to use ledger paper. You can use any paper that you have, old book pages. I just have plenty of this, and I like using it, so I will be making use of that. I will also be making use of some book pages. So here I have my old German Bismarck book, and I will be using, I love the text and the language, the font and the feel of this paper. So I will be using plenty of that on my finished project to give me some interest. I will also be using some of this, which is an old French agricultural notebook, and again I will be putting some pages of that, or bits and bobs of that, on it. But primarily I will be using this antique papery paper collection. Now, for those of you who've seen a previous video of mine, you'll know that this is the antique papery Nagasaki collection, and these are just a few pages that I had left over in amongst my scraps from the last time I printed this out. So as you can see, gorgeous papers, but I've got a few duplications here. But having said that, this project, in fact any decoupaging project, is a fantastic way to use up all your bits and pieces and your scraps of your digi collections that you've got left over, of your book pages. So dig those out and use them up. I have scraps of this, not full pages, but still scraps of this in my scrap pile, and I will be using those first, and then as and when I run out, I will be resorting to these duplication pages. So let's get started. As you see, we've opened up the box, and it couldn't be any easier. All you need to start doing now is ripping up your papers and gluing them on. So I'm not going to be boring you with spending hours and hours chatting away whilst I'm doing this. I'm sure you've got other projects, that crafting projects that you need to get on with or want to get on with, but I will just put on a few pages or a few pieces, and then I will leave it, and I will come back to you tomorrow showing you what it looks like when it's all dried, and doing the next stage. So a couple of tips. What I found when I do this is I try not to get everything too sodden. It depends on the paper that you use. I do tend to try and glue well up to my edges. And as you can see already, I've resorted to using my fingers. Now, you'll see that I've got, oh, I'm a little bit off camera there, sorry. You'll see that I have got 1 or 2 air bubbles. I don't particularly worry about those at this stage because we are going to be covering up with another layer. But I do try and make sure, really, that I haven't got too many of those. And here we go. I'm just going to pop that piece up there. And as you can see, I'm just randomly popping my pieces of paper on. And if I can readily see that it's not going to stick, I just add a little bit more glue. Trying to avoid, where possible, my air bubbles. See, I can't resist getting my fingers in there. A couple of tips that I would say is, first one, as I've already mentioned, is glue right to your edges. And then the other one I would say is, where you have a fold, don't end your piece of collage paper absolutely on the fold. Try and take it over the fold, for the simple reason that when you come to fold your box or your fold, you will find that if you've taken your paper right up to the edge and not past it, that when you make your fold, it will lift. So it's really, really, I think, important that you don't do that, because what you want is you want a nice neat finish to this. As you can see, I'm overlapping. I'm not that bothered. I'm not putting much glue, sorry, on my brush. It might look like a lot, but there isn't really that much glue on my brush. I'm just making sure I've got enough to hold it down. And then I like to, as you've seen, work it down with my fingers. The other tip was, that you've already heard, is glue right up to your edges, and that makes life simpler. I've got a nice big air bubble there, which I don't want. I'll see what I can do about that in a moment. And as you can see, I'm taking my paper past the edge of my box, because I'm going to trim that down afterwards to get a nice neat finish. Now, this ledger paper is quite thin, and that's why I'm not using too much glue, and because I know it does tend to buckle when it gets wet. If you decide that you don't want to put too many layers of paper onto your box, that's absolutely fine, but I just like to mute down this fairly bright green on my Ryvita box. Just going to put a little bit more glue underneath that because my paper's buckling. I tend to find as well, if it does lift and buckle a little bit, that when it dries out, a lot of that wrinkling and buckling will go. So it's I've found doing these that it's a little bit trial and error, knowing your paper, knowing your glue, and knowing what it would look like when it dries out. And it's just really something that I've picked up as I've gone along doing these over the last few months or so. So I'm just going to do this last little bit down here, and then I will let you go so that you can all go off and do your own lovely projects. And I will, as I say, show you how I've got on tomorrow and go through the next stage. And the reason I'm going to be doing it tomorrow is because I want to give this plenty of time to dry out. I'm not going to pop it on a radiator or anything like that. I'm just going to let it air dry just naturally to minimize the wrinkling and any warping that I'm going to get or might get by trying to speed up the drying process. So I'm just working my glue and my paper. Now, don't panic if you do get wrinkles. I'm going to hold this up in a minute so that you can see what this looks like. And it does look pretty horrendous in terms of wrinkles at the moment, but it's amazing what it will look like tomorrow when it's had a chance to dry naturally. Now, I'm working here on a glass mat, which is very forgiving. If I'm gluing for my journals or anything like that, I usually work on a magazine or a glue book, as most of you will do. But I tend to find when I'm doing these that the glue book kind of gets in my way more than anything. So I like to use my matte, and then just give it a good old wipe down afterwards, and it cleans off really quickly and easily. And also as I go along, I tend to lift it up and just wipe it with a baby wipe. So as you can see, I'm using less is more in terms of the glue. I'm just making sure that where I want it to glue down, it is gluing down without putting too much on and causing an issue with wrinkling. Now that's as far as I'm going to do on camera, because you really don't want to hear me carrying on babbling away. It's so self-explanatory. It just gives a bit of a surface. If your book pages or your digi scraps or whatever are on fairly thick paper, then you could probably just decoupage straight over the top of this. That looks fine as it is now, but I know when I add glue to this and to this, that this becomes slightly transparent and the green comes through and it ruins the effect that I want. So that's why I'm putting down this base layer of just this very, very thin ledger paper. Plus also it gives me, as I've mentioned before, an extra layer of stability and durability for the box itself. I should mention that this is just bog standard printer paper. It's very, very thin. It's fine for what I need to do in my journals for keeping the bulk down, or for other friendship journal projects, but for this it's a bit too flimsy. But if you've printed yours on slightly thicker, or if you're using thicker book pages, then that's absolutely fine. You probably won't need to put down this base layer. So as I said, I will hold mine up to the camera. Now it does look pretty horrendous. It looks like there's loads of air bubbles, but these are fine. These little gentle wrinkles, they will all, or the vast majority of them, will flatten out as the glue dries. What I will do when I've collaged it all and I'm ready for it to dry, is I will just hang it over something so that where these creases are, they will naturally sit and my paper will do a natural fold there. If you find that your paper cracks, don't panic. When it's dried, just put a little bit more glue underneath it and gently mould it down with your fingers to get the ends to meet again. Or, and that's the joy with doing this, just put another piece of paper over the top. So I'm sure that's going to happen at some stage as I do this. So I'm going to leave it there, everybody. Thank you so much for bearing with me. As I told you, a hugely simple project today. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to finish collaging all of this, both sides, and then I'm just going to hang it somewhere in the air to dry, and then get on with some other projects. All right, everybody. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.